Hi everyone, welcome back. We've got a brand new story to share with you. So let's begin. My name is Morgan, and before I was falsely accused of SA by my 13-year-old niece, my life was nothing unusual. I wasn't rich, and I wasn't the kind of person who attracted drama. I worked a steady job at a small logistics company. I woke up early, I showed up on time, and I went home tired but satisfied. I had a girlfriend I'd been with for almost 3 years, and we were talking about moving in together. Back then, I honestly believed my life was heading in the right direction. When it came to my family, things were every day enough. We weren't the type of family that called each other every day or had big gatherings every weekend. But we weren't distant or broken either. I saw my parents at least once, maybe twice, over the past 2 weeks. I kept in contact with my siblings primarily through group chats or when someone needed help with something around the house. I wasn't extremely close to everyone, but I didn't have problems with anyone either. I also visit my married sister a couple of times since she stays pretty close to my place. My sister had a daughter who was quiet, often kept to herself, and I always treated her the same way I treated every kid in the family, with patience and respect. When I look back at everything that happened, I realized the signs were already there long before the accusation ever came up. My sister's marriage had been crumbling for months, and you could feel the tension every time you stepped into their house. She and her husband argued over everything: money, chores, schedules, even small things. Nothing was ever calm. They didn't talk to each other in a typical way anymore. Every conversation sounded like they were carrying old anger into new arguments. You didn't have to live with them to sense it. You could feel the stress the moment you walked through their front door, as if the air were heavier than it needed to be. Their daughter, my niece, was 13 at that time, right in that stage where kids are already trying to figure themselves out, and the chaos at home was not helping her at all. She had always been a quiet kid, but over time, her silence changed into something different. She stopped joining conversations, stopped smiling as much, and started avoiding eye contact. Instead of hanging out in the living room as she used to when I came around, she would disappear into her room the moment she got home. When anyone tried to ask if she was okay, she would shrug, mumble something, or sometimes even snap in frustration. It wasn't the kind of anger you aim at someone. It was the kind you aim at the world when everything around you feels too big and too loud. Even during family gatherings, I remember noticing that she looked overwhelmed even when nothing was happening. It was apparent something was weighing her down, but at the time, I told myself it was normal teenage behavior. Kids her age often go through emotional ups and downs. They cry easily, get embarrassed for no reason, and feel like small problems are the end of the world. I had no reason to believe what she was dealing with was anything more than that. Looking back now, I can admit I underestimated how much the stress at home could affect her. I didn't push further or ask more profound questions because I didn't want to invade her privacy or assume the worst. I truly believed she was just adjusting to being a teenager. I never imagined her emotional state would become the spark that turned into something far more destructive, something that would flip my life upside down in ways I could never have predicted. The day everything fell apart started with a phone call that didn't feel normal from the moment I heard my mother's voice. She didn't say hello, didn't ask where I was, didn't even take a breath. She just told me to come home right away. Her tone was sharp and rushed, the kind she used only when something serious had happened. I kept asking her what was wrong, but she wouldn't answer. She just repeated that I needed to come immediately. That silence between her words felt heavy, and even though I didn't know why, my stomach tightened the entire drive over. I told myself it was probably about my sister's marriage again, maybe another big fight that spilled over. I had no idea I was walking straight into the worst moment of my life. When I got to the house, my family was gathered in the living room, but no one greeted me the way they usually did. They all looked away as soon as I walked in. My mother's eyes were red, my father was pacing, and my sister sat on the edge of the couch like she was bracing herself for something painful. I kept asking, "What's going on? Why did you call me?" But they wouldn't answer. Every time I tried to make eye contact, someone would look down or turn their head. It felt like I wasn't welcome in my own family home, and that confusion hit me harder than I expected. Finally, my sister stood up, but it felt like she could barely hold herself together. She tried to speak, but her voice cracked, and she covered her mouth with her hand. When she finally forced the words out, she told me her daughter, my 13-year-old niece, said I had assaulted her. For a moment, it was like the sound in the room cut out. I literally felt my ears ring. My first reaction wasn't even anger. It was disbelief, so intense that my brain couldn't even accept the information. I remember saying what? Over and over like I had misheard her. My sister was crying so hard she could barely breathe, and I felt like the ground moved under my feet. It didn't make sense. Nothing about it made sense. The moment the shock wore off enough for me to speak, I told them it wasn't true. I didn't raise my voice, didn't yell, didn't get defensive. I was too stunned to be anything except honest and confused. I kept asking for details. When did she say this happened? Where I was supposed to be? What exactly did she claim? But no one wanted to hear anything from me. My words didn't matter. My truth didn't matter. They already believed the worst before I could even get a complete sentence out. My mother kept shaking her head, as if she couldn't stand to hear me talk. My father wouldn't even look in my direction. It felt like the walls were closing in on me. My sister finally said something that made my soul shatter into 1,000 pieces. She told us her daughter wouldn't lie. She said she had to protect her child. And in that moment, I realized they had already made a decision about me without any evidence, without asking for my side, and without giving me even a moment of trust. They chose fear over me, their own family. They chose a story over the truth. Hearing them say they had to protect the child was like being told I was already guilty in their minds, no matter what the facts were. Standing there, staring at people who had known me my entire life, but suddenly looked at me as if I were a stranger, was the moment everything truly broke open. It was the moment I understood that the damage wasn't just in the accusation. It was in how fast my family believed it. When the police arrived at my family's house, I couldn't believe how quickly this situation escalated. I remember standing in the living room, still confused, trying to understand how my niece could say something like that, when two officers walked in with serious expressions. They didn't shout or act aggressively, but their tone made it clear that they saw me as a problem before they even spoke to me. They asked me to sit down, and one of them explained that since the accusation involved a minor, they had to follow strict procedures. I tried to explain that I had done nothing wrong and that there must be some misunderstanding, but they barely reacted. It was like the moment my name appeared in their report, their minds had already closed around one idea. I was dangerous. They questioned me right there in front of my family, asking where I had been, what I had done, and if I had ever been alone with my niece. Every answer I gave felt like it fell into a black hole. Nothing I said made any difference. When they told me they needed to take my phone and my laptop for investigation, I felt a deep drop in my stomach. Those devices held years of my personal life, messages, memories, work. But I didn't argue. I thought that if I cooperated with everything, the truth would come out faster. I believed that acting calmly and telling the truth would protect me. I didn't realize that the moment the accusation was filed, the truth didn't matter as much as the story people chose to believe. Leaving the house that day was even worse. As I stepped outside, I saw a few neighbors standing on their porches. The police car parked in front of the house made the situation even more damaging. Even if the officers hadn't arrested me, the sight of them, there was enough for people to create their own version of events. And trust me, people love dramatic stories more than they love facts. After that day, things changed quickly as this horrible narrative spread fast, especially when it involved something as shocking as what I was accused of. The most painful part was realizing that people didn't wait for evidence. No one said, "Let's see what really happened." Instead, they acted like the accusation alone was proof. In their eyes, I wasn't the same person they had known for years. I had become a headline, a warning, a story people shared without caring what it did to me. And even though I knew I was innocent, I couldn't escape the feeling that the whole world was slowly turning its back on me, one whisper at a time. When the accusation first came out, I honestly believed my girlfriend would stand by me. We'd been together long enough that I thought she knew my character better than anyone. But only a few days after everything happened, She asked to meet at our apartment. I remember sitting on the edge of the couch, waiting for her to walk in, hoping she'd say she believed me. Instead, she stood near the door like she was ready to leave at any moment. And she told me she couldn't stay with someone who had been accused of harming a child. She didn't ask me for my side of the story or ask what really happened. She just told me the accusation alone was too much for her to handle. I could see her hands shaking when she talked, like she couldn't even look at me without feeling scared or ashamed. What hurt more was knowing that the news had gone round with her friends and family, having already made up their minds about me. They were telling her to leave right away, saying she needed to protect herself, as if being near me put her in danger. I wasn't even charged with anything, but they acted like they were saving her life by pulling her away from me. I heard from a mutual friend that her mother was the one who pushed the hardest, saying she didn't want her daughter to waste time defending a man whose name was already damaged. Those words stuck with me because they showed me that, to them, my actual innocence didn't matter. Just the rumor was enough. We didn't have a long, emotional goodbye. She came with 2 bags, grabbed the last few things she left in my house, and walked out without a hug or even eye contact. I stood there in the middle of the room, watching her take the life we built together in a matter of minutes. The silence in the apartment after she left felt louder than anything I'd ever heard. I kept waiting for a message, a call, anything that said she wanted to talk more or at least hear the truth. Instead, she blocked me everywhere. Her phone, social media, even email. It was like I stopped existing overnight. Losing her like that became one of the most challenging parts of the entire ordeal. The accusation hurt, the family turning their backs on me hurt, but her leaving cut deeper because she was the one person I thought would at least listen before making a decision. It made me realize how quickly people distance themselves when fear and public shame enter the picture. It wasn't just a breakup, it was a moment that made me feel completely alone, like there was no one left in my corner. My work was affected by the rumor. It started spreading online in small circles at first, and I thought it would fade away once people realized the truth would come out. But the opposite happened. Every hour, more people were talking about it, passing around my name like it meant something terrible, even though there wasn't a single piece of evidence against me. By the time my manager called me into his office, I already sensed what was coming. He didn't even look angry, just nervous, like he didn't want to be the one delivering the message. He told me HR needed to speak with me, and the moment I stepped into that room, I could say that the decision had already been made. The HR manager tried to sound calm and professional, but every sentence felt like it was from a lawyer's script. She explained that because the accusation involved a minor, the company had to protect itself from backlash. Even though I told them repeatedly that I didn't do anything, that the police hadn't charged me with anything, and that the investigation was still ongoing, none of it mattered. They placed me on administrative leave until further notice, which was just a polite way of saying they didn't want me around. I wasn't allowed to access my work email. My projects were handed over to someone else, and I was told not to come back to the office until they contacted me again. Weeks went by, and the company's silence grew louder than anything they had said in that HR meeting. No one checked in. No one asked how I was doing. No one even asked if the investigation had cleared me. They simply pretended I no longer existed. Every day, I woke up hoping for an email or a call, something to show they still believed in fairness, or at least in hearing all sides of a situation. Instead, I learned from a coworker that my role had been quietly reassigned to someone else. Not temporarily, permanently. They didn't fire me officially, but they made sure there was no job waiting for me once everything settled. Losing my job didn't just hurt my pride. It destroyed the one thing I could rely on financially. Suddenly, everything came out of my own pocket. Legal consultations weren't cheap, and I needed them to protect myself. Rent still had to be paid, even though my apartment felt more like a hiding place than a home at that point. Food, bills, transportation. Every basic need became a calculation. Before all this, I never realized how quickly your life can tilt when your income disappears. I went from being stable and independent to watching my savings drain day by day, all because of something I didn't do. And the worst part was the feeling that I had been abandoned not just by my family, but by a place where I had given years of my life. I had worked late nights, covered extra shifts, and pushed myself to be dependable. Yet the moment a rumor appeared, every bit of loyalty I had shown them meant nothing. They didn't wait for the truth. They didn't ask for clarification. They just pushed me out quietly and hoped that doing so would save their image. In the end, it was clear that my innocence didn't matter to them. Only their reputation did. By the time the investigation dragged into its third month, it was clear I couldn't stay anywhere near my old life. Everywhere I went, I felt eyes on me, even if people weren't actually looking. My name had become a quiet warning in my neighborhood, and every familiar place felt unsafe. So I packed up what little I had left and moved into a small, cheap apartment far from everything I had known. The building was old, the walls were thin, and the only view from the window was the back of another building, but at least it was somewhere I could disappear. I didn't choose that place because I liked it. I chose it because it was all I could afford, and because I didn't want to run into anyone who already believed the worst about me. Settling into that apartment was the moment the real loneliness began. The kind of loneliness that sits beside you even when the room is quiet. I spent most days trying to keep myself busy, but my mind always drifted back to the same questions. How did my life fall apart so fast? How could a single lie ruin everything I had worked for? There were mornings when I woke up with my chest tight like I couldn't breathe, because I kept thinking about how people saw me now. I felt anxious every time my phone buzzed, even though it was usually just a spam message. I was humiliated, angry, and confused all at once, and there were moments when I honestly wondered if my old life had ever been real. It felt like someone else's memories. But what hurt more than any rumor, investigation, or sideways glance was the silence from my own family. They didn't call to check on me. They didn't ask how I was coping. They didn't even ask if the story was true. They just accepted it as fact and walked away. That silence was louder than any shout or argument could have been. I kept waiting for one person, just one, to say, "Tell me your side of the story." No one did. And that was when I truly understood that the pain of abandonment can cut deeper than the pain of accusation. By the 5th month, I've been forced to sit with emotions I never imagined I'd face. I had to learn how to survive each day on my own, holding on to the truth even when it felt like no one wanted to hear it. And in that lonely, cramped apartment, I realized something I never expected. Sometimes the most brutal battles are the ones you fight in silence, with no one cheering for you, and no one standing beside you. When the 6th month rolled around, I had stopped expecting anything to change. I had gotten used to waking up every day with the same heavy feeling in my chest, the same silence from my family, and the same fear that this situation might follow me for the rest of my life. I figured the investigation would stay stuck in the same loop. The people I loved would keep pretending I didn't exist, and the lie that broke my life would continue hanging over my head. So when the truth finally came out, it didn't feel like a victory or a moment of celebration. And the way it happened was slow, quiet, and heavier than anything I had imagined. I would find out later that my niece had been in therapy twice a week this whole time, with everyone believing she needed help processing the trauma of what she said I did. But no one realized that she was actually trying to bear the weight of her own lie. She was only 13, and each month that passed made the story harder for her to keep up with. Every time an adult repeated her words back to her, the lie grew bigger, and the guilt inside her grew even faster. Eventually, she reached a point where she couldn't hold up the story anymore. During one of her sessions, her therapist asked her questions she had asked before, simple questions meant to help her talk through what happened. But instead of repeating the things she had been saying for months, my niece broke down completely. She started crying. She told the therapist that none of her stories was true. She said I never touched her, never hurt her, never made her uncomfortable. She admitted she had made everything up, and she explained why. She said she had been under a lot of stress because her parents were always fighting. Their arguments were loud, constant, and impossible for her to escape, leaving her feeling ignored and unimportant in her own home. She also said she misunderstood something small that happened months earlier, and her feelings twisted it into something worse. When an adult later asked her a leading question, something like, "Has anyone made you feel uncomfortable?" she panicked and said my name without thinking. She thought it would stop at that moment, maybe lead to a conversation or get her parents to pay more attention to her. She never expected it to blow up into police reports, cut off relationships, and the destruction of my entire life. Because the therapist is a mandated reporter, she couldn't keep this confession to herself. She called my sister and her husband into her office right away and told them everything. My niece sat there crying and apologizing, but the truth was already out. The therapist explained clearly that their daughter had recanted, that no abuse ever happened, and that I had been innocent the whole time. She also explained how the chaos in their home pushed their daughter into an emotional corner she didn't know how to escape. When the reality finally hit them, my sister and her husband had no choice but to face the fact that they had built their anger, their fear, and their decisions on a lie. They had thrown me away without a second thought. They had helped destroy my life. And now they had to sit there, listening to the truth they never bothered to consider. The innocent person they abandoned was the only one who told the truth from the beginning. When the truth finally came out, I expected silence from my family, maybe even anger for being proven wrong. But what I didn't expect was how quickly they tried to slip back into my life as if nothing had happened. My sister was the first one to show up. She didn't call ahead or send a message. She just knocked on my door one afternoon, and when I opened it, she burst into tears before I could even ask how she had located my new place and what she wanted. She kept saying she was sorry, over and over again, like repeating it would somehow erase the 6 months I spent alone. She told me they didn't know what else to do, that they were scared, that they thought they were protecting her daughter. She wanted me to understand that they reacted in the heat of the moment. But all I could think about was how quickly she had believed a lie, and how easily she had shut me out without asking for my side of the story, despite the bond we had all our lives. After my sister left, my phone started ringing. My mother called so many times that I had to silence my phone to get through the rest of the day. And every voicemail sounded the same. She kept saying we needed to fix the family, that now the truth was out, there was no reason for us to stay apart. She talked as if all that was standing between us was a simple misunderstanding that could be cleared up with one family meeting. But the thing she didn't seem to understand was that the damage wasn't in the accusation itself. It was in the way they treated me after it. It was in how quickly they turned away instead of standing beside me. Every time I heard her voice on the phone, calling me son, like the past half year hadn't happened. It felt like she was trying to pull me back into a place I no longer trusted. It didn't stop there. Relatives I hadn't heard from the entire time suddenly started sending long messages, pretending they had been worried about me the whole time. They talked about forgiveness and letting things go, as if forgiveness was a switch I could flip, and everything would return to normal. Some said things like, "Come over this weekend. Family is all you have." Others told me that mistakes happen, and we shouldn't let one situation tear us apart. None of them mentioned that their silence had felt like betrayal. None acknowledged the nights I stayed awake, wondering if I would lose everything because no one believed me long enough even to listen. Their sudden concern felt too neat, too clean, too convenient. The truth is, their change of heart didn't come from love. It came from shame. They realized they had stood on the wrong side of the truth, and now they wanted to rewrite the story so they wouldn't have to face how badly they handled it. They wanted me back in the family picture so the mistake didn't look so harsh, so the guilt didn't sit so heavy on them. It wasn't about me. It was about them trying to feel better about what they had done. As all these messages piled up, I found myself feeling something I didn't expect: clarity. I realized that none of these people, not one of them, believed in me when it actually mattered. They didn't ask for proof. They didn't ask for my version of events. They didn't pause to think about who I had been to them for years. They just pushed me out like I was nothing. And once you've been thrown away that easily, it's hard to forget how quickly it happened. Their apologies didn't erase the humiliation I felt in my community. They didn't restore my job, my relationship, or the sense of safety I used to have when I walked into my own home. They didn't fix the nights I spent wondering how a lie could wreck a life. A few words said after the truth came out couldn't undo the months of fear, anger, sadness, and loneliness. I couldn't pretend the wound was healed just because they finally recognized they were wrong. So I made a decision that surprised even me. I chose not to go back. I decided not to accept their invitations, their apologies, or their explanations. I decided that I could never return to a group of people who tossed me aside so easily the moment they were scared. I understood that trust isn't something you rebuild just because someone says sorry. Trust is built on action, and their actions told me everything I needed to know. Instead of reopening the door to people who only wanted me back because my innocence made them uncomfortable, I decided to start over. I chose peace over pretending. I chose distance over damage. I chose myself. And for the first time in a long time, that choice felt like the right one. It won't be easy, but as I keep working to clear my name, I'm sure of one thing. I don't need these people in my life. My reputation will recover in time. Maybe not immediately, but slowly and steadily it will. I've accepted that rebuilding an image takes patience, discipline, and silence amid the noise. What I'm still unsure about is how to handle the people who turned their backs on me the moment things went bad. The people who believed the worst without asking a single question. The ones who disappeared when loyalty mattered most. So let me ask you honestly, if you were in my position, what would you do? Would you forgive them and let them back into your life once the dust settles? Or would you take the same path I'm taking now, cutting ties, moving forward, and choosing peace over the illusion of friendship and relationship?